Where are we on England now after last weekend, Luke? Obviously I think we were all in agreement that we thought they were being pumped up an awful lot by the English media.
Were we? Were we all?
Well, I definitely thought they were being pumped up. What are you claiming? I thought they were good. I've been saying to everyone that I thought they were very overrated.
Okay. We'll have to check the tape on that one.
On the Helix, at the Helix, I think I said it as well. Ian Madigan was the one pushing England. I think I definitely.
Okay. Well, maybe that's the case, because I remember I was very clear on not being as look, definite improvement, but I just wasn't sure they were as far along as they thought they were.
There's a school of thought that them losing to Scotland makes it more difficult for Ireland because they've gotten another kick up the arse. It's gone across the Irish Sea. People are being kicked up the arse over there as well. But I actually think it makes Ireland's assignment easier. I think England feeling confident about themselves at Twickenham would have made it even maybe more difficult. I actually think they'll be doubting themselves this week and doubting their progress.
Always remember Owen Redden saying the week playing the English teams never pump their tires up. Because they, an Irish, with an Irish team, you want to be so careful. You don't say, there's no slight in there. There's no kind of patronizing kind of, all this. You be so careful what you say with a team like that, because, when they're the underdog, they're really, really dangerous. England, the complete opposite. Never pump the tires. If they're in their pomp, if they're feeling on top, if they feel they can bully you, if they think they're great, I agree with you. I think they play an awful lot better. They're good being the kind of front runner. So yeah, I probably agree. Look, I will say there's, from an emotional pitch, there's probably a few things that, I'd say you see an improvement from last week, definitely. I think, Toje's 100 cap, that's that'll get the team to an emotional pitch. So I would imagine there'd be a good atmosphere in Twickenham. I think the team will want to do well, because they want to improve from last week, but also for Toje, he's a bit of a talisman for them. So there's a bit of that going on. But look, Ireland are also in that position. I think they need to improve from the match. I thought it was a really close shave against Italy, and I think they're better than that. I think they need to show that. And I think they will continue to improve throughout the championship. I think this might be a stretch for them. But I still expect this to be a very tight game and Ireland to put up a massive fight. I think both teams look like England looked sloppy on the weekend, but they looked completely, out of sorts out in the wide channels. I mean, if you can get the ball out there, you will cause them trouble. I mean, Scotland shredded them. I mean, there was guys doing a Rundle at times look completely lost, like turning his back on players, they kind of really, really weird stuff. And looked like he could be got at. And I thought, England just generally out wide look poor defensively. I still think they have power. You can see the power that they have. If you do not stop them at source, from a defensive perspective, when they have that momentum, George Ford can still pick you apart, and they still have plenty of threat behind the scrum. And I think they're big ball carriers. They've got some real power there. So you have got to contain them. You've got to be on it defensively. Ireland cannot put in the same defensive performance they put in against Italy, against England. They will get pulverized, and I think they'll get picked apart by what is still a great 10 in my mind. I always think Ford, look, he's a small guy, and he makes his tackles, but I always think, he's never going to be one of the greats for that for me. But from an attacking perspective, I mean, wow, when he's humming, he's really, really hard to stop, and he generally picks the right options, 95% of the time. Top class operator. So I think this is a tight one, but I think it's still a massive ask, and both teams will need to be better than last week if they want to come out on the right side.
Yeah, Keane, what's your assessment? I said the England team was named earlier. 3 changes: Tom Curry and Henry Pollock into the back row, Guy Pepper and Sam Underhill go to the bench, and then 1 change in the back line. Ollie Lawrence comes in to the centre. Tom Roebuck is dropped, and Tommy Freeman moves from 13 to the right wing, where people, I think the consensus is that people think he's probably better there.
Better defensively, Will, as well.
Yeah,
I think. Obviously, got the aerial threat as well.
I don't know. All of a sudden, the England team doesn't look quite as formidable. Looking at that bench, it doesn't, the PAM squad, which was getting so heralded in November and at the start of the Six Nations. He's kind of swapped that around to kind of beef up the starting team, and all of a sudden it doesn't look quite as formidable coming off the bench. And where Ireland might even have the edge in the bench, and the bench has been very good for Ireland the first 2 weeks. Albeit you'd rather maybe the starting team picked up the slack a little more. What's your assessment on England heading into Saturday?
Yeah, I see they've changed both of their backs on the bench as well. Jack Van Portfleet and Marcus Smith are in instead of Ben Spencer and Finn Smith. I know Borthwick got a lot of stick for not having Marcus Smith on the bench last week in terms of that 6-2. But I think Ollie Lawrence coming back in at 13, he's a class player. And I think they lacked a bit of punch last week against Scotland. And look, Fraser Dingwall isn't necessarily going to give you that, but he's a great facilitator. And if he can get Ollie Lawrence into the game outside of him, I think Freeman is still looks more comfortable on the wing. And look, we know how dangerous he's been, whether it's been for Northampton or for the Lions over the last while. But I think Scotland showed certainly what my perception of this English team is that when the kicking game or in the aerial game doesn't work, like what else do they have in their armory? And like Borthwick went and got Lee Blackett, the attack coach from Bath, and I was thinking, wow, this is a really progressive step, because I think like the work that Blackett has done or had done, sorry, with Bath in terms of the attack had been exceptional with the style of play that Bath were playing. But like struggling to see the impact of Lee Blackett, because we're still playing Borthwick ball, for want of a better term. And when it works, it's bloody effective, as their 12-game winning run showed. But I think I'd be optimistic from an Irish point of view. Particularly, I go back to one of the very first points I made at the start of our chat. The Irish back three was excellent in the air last weekend against an Italian team who, by the way, like were very good in the air against Scotland the previous week. So I'd imagine that they'll be full of confidence as well, that they can handle what England are going to throw at them, because for all the changes that they've made, I don't see them tactically going to be playing a different game plan. And I think if Ireland are able to withstand that, obviously the scrum would be the big concern for me from an Irish point of view. But if Ireland can, hold their own as they did in Paris, unbelievably well, held their own, if they can do that and manage the aerial game and the scraps, of course, on the ground off the back of that, I give Ireland a very good chance, lads, of getting a win this weekend. I think I'd be fearful of a potential English backlash. I'm not sure if last weekend's result was a good thing from an Irish point of view. I think Luke's point about Maro Itoje's 100 cap is spot on as well. That will be a massive driver for them. But I don't know. I'm bullish enough, and I have been, to be honest, since the start of Six Nations, about Ireland potentially causing a bit of an ambush this weekend.
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking a lot differently about the game than I did, say, after Paris and England looking very good week one. I think it will be very, very close. I think it'll be a good game.